Hey y'all, welcome to the Endless TBR. My name is Christian, and this is my YouTube channel where I love to talk about all things book related in my life. Thank you so much for being here. In this video, I'm going to talk about the books that I read in 2025, August 2025, not all of 2025, just August of 2025, as well as rank those books in order from my least enjoyment to my most enjoyment. And I'm also going to outline the books that I plan to read in September of 2025. And if you've watched some of my videos in the past, if you happen to have watched my August TBR video where I outlined the books that I wanted to read in August, you'll know that I was riding a pretty big high from the month of July. In July, I had probably the best reading month I've ever had in my entire life. I finished no, not eight, 11 books, some very sizable books in that month. So I was feeling really, really good. So when I did my August TBR, I think I was like trying to keep that train going. And I even said in the video, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to reach my goals for this month. There was a lot of books that I wanted to read, some of them quite chunky. So, good news and bad news is good news, I did really, really well. I read a lot of books, a lot of great books. When you compare the number of pages that I read in July to the number of pages I read in August, like you stack the books side by side, it's actually pretty close. So, I had a really, really good month, all things considered, with school starting up back up and all of that. The bad news is I did miss my goal by one book. I just didn't have it in me. There was some books this month that just took way longer to read than I was anticipating because they were way more difficult than I thought they were going to be. I just didn't have the time to finish that final book. So I'll talk about which one that is later, but I'm going to move it from August into September. It's going to be one of the books that I read in September. So let's get right into this. I am going to rank the books that I read in August of 2025. This ranking is going to be from my personal least enjoyment to my most enjoyment. I always like to say this whenever I do one of these rankings. This is not me saying like this is objectively the worst book and objectively the best book in this list. It's based off of my personal preference of how much I enjoyed it. I feel like that's especially important today because the first book I'm going to talk about is one that I think is absolutely an incredible 5 out of 5 book, and yet it was my least favorite book of this month. And that was The Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien. So yeah. So I love The Lord of the Rings so much. The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings are some of my favorite books of all time. So this was my first time reading The Silmarillion. And what I will say is I think this book is absolutely a 5 out of 5 star book. It is so in depth. It gives you so much lore and it is so detailed. And if you are a fan of Lord of the Rings and you want more of it, this is the exact book you should go to. It gives you so much about the first and second ages, the creation of Middle Earth, all of the different races. There's just so much detail. There are hundreds and hundreds of different names of locations and people, and it goes so much in depth about just everything regarding the first two ages of Middle Earth. The reason why this book is lowest for me is this is probably the hardest book I've ever had to read in my entire life. Um, I said it was great that there are hundreds and hundreds of names. It's also kind of tough that there are hundreds and hundreds of names because Tolkien does not hold your hand at all when it comes to this book. It just jumps into it and it shoots names at you rapid fire the entire time. And there were so many moments where I had to stop what I was doing, flip back to the glossary, which by the way is like a fourth of this entire book is like a glossary of all the different names. Find like that person or that location, refresh my memory on who they were, and then go back into it. And I read to relax. And while I think this book is absolutely incredible and it is the perfect example on like how to build your world, and it just even further proves how much of a genius Tolkien is. It felt like reading a book for school, like it felt like homework. I definitely need to reread this book multiple times, and I think once I do, I'll probably come to enjoy it even more. But yeah, as it stands, this was just my least favorite time of this month for reading, even though it was an absolutely incredible book. So that is going to be The Cimmerillion. Moving on, by the way, I didn't mention this. I read 9 books this month. So that was book number 9. This is going to be book number 8. And that book is The Last Battle, book number 7 in the Chronicles of Narnia. Now, about a week ago, I made a video ranking and talking a little more in depth about all of the books in the Chronicles of Narnia series because I finished reading the entire series this month. So if you want a little more in depth about each of these books and my thoughts on them, you can go see that video. I'll keep these relatively brief in this video because I did talk about them before. But coming in at last place for the Chronicles of Narnia, I have The Last Battle. And long story short, it's just because This book is definitely the most depressing and dreary of all of the Narnia books. The thing that draws me to Narnia is the sense of like the fantastical and the adventure, and meeting cool characters like the fawns and the centaurs and interacting with them. And while this book definitely has cool moments and cool creatures, it felt so depressing at times, and it's that's just not something that draws me to the Narnia books. So if you're looking for something a little more serious in the Narnia franchise, you might really enjoy The Last Battle, but it just wasn't personally for me. Coming in at number 7 for the month is going to be another Narnia book, and that is book number 6, The Silver Chair. These books are very glary. I'm trying to see if I can get it without having too much glare on there. I'm kind of failing at it. But book number 6, I should mention that I did give a positive review to all of the Narnia books. Two of them I gave 5 stars to. 5 of them I gave 4 stars to. That was like a tongue twister. So even The Last Battle and The Silver Chair, I think, are good books. I gave them 4 stars, which is a positive review in my opinion. These are my least favorite of them. So number 6, the reason why I didn't like this book as much as others is just because of the main characters. I find Narnia is very synonymous with the Pevensey kids. Those are my favorite characters in the Chronicles of Narnia. And book number 6, The Silver Chair, follows Eustace Scrubb and Jill Pole, two characters that I enjoy, but they just weren't my favorite, and I wasn't invested in their story and in their characters. Although I will say there is one character in this book who is one of my favorites of all time in Narnia, and that is Puddlegum, the Marsh Wiggle. I absolutely love him. I think he is a great and fun character, but as far as the other main characters that we follow, they just weren't my favorite, even though there's a lot of fun, adventure, and very cool landscapes that are visited in the Silver Chair. All right, it's coming in at number 6, another Narnia book, and that is going to be The Horse and His Boy. Now, this is one of the Narnia books that surprised me a lot. I thought that this was going to end up on the lower end of my ranking for the Narnia series, but it actually ended up on the higher end because I really, really enjoyed it. This is as close as you're going to get to like a spin-off story in the Narnia universe. The Horse and His Boy is very much a standalone tale. There's slight crossovers between other books, like it's mentioned briefly in another Narnia book, and you do get to see some of the Pevensey kids all grown up in this story. But it's very much about these characters, Gasta and Bree, and their adventures to try to escape the Calormens, I think is how it's pronounced, and get into the land of Narnia. So it follows them and the adventures that they go on, and it's just so much fun. It's just such a fun, simple, and exciting adventure book where you see all these cool different landscapes and go on all these different harrowing adventures with these characters. And I just found it to be a lot of fun, and it brought me a lot of joy to read. So that's why it ended up a little higher on my list than others. All right. Coming in at number 3, 4, 5. Coming in at number 5 is Defy the Storm. This is a young adult novel in the Phase 3 of Star Wars The High Republic. And I enjoyed this book quite a bit. I thought it was a lot of fun. I gave it a 4 out of 5 as well. And the thing about this book that I thought was most interesting is there's a young adult novel in Phase 1 of The High Republic. It is called Out of the Shadows, I believe. And I did not care for Out of the Shadows very much at all at the time of reading it. I definitely had it on the very low end of like my overall ranking of the High Republic thus far. And what this book did is it actually made me appreciate that book a lot more. There's a lot of character crossover, a lot of continued development that builds upon the story in that book. There are a lot of story beats that carry over from that book as well. And it made me retroactively appreciate that book a lot more. And it made me care about characters like Sylvester Yarrow and Joanna Sparkburn that I didn't care much for. By the end of this book, I actually liked them a lot more. And and Zylan Graff, he was another one too, where I was kind of like about him. And then at the end of this book, I enjoyed him a lot more. And I got to spend more time with Vernestra, who's one of my favorite Star Wars High Republic characters. So that was Defy the Storm. I enjoyed it quite a bit. Still have a little bit ways to go for the High Republic there, but it was a good book. Coming in at number 4, this was the biggest surprise of the Chronicles of Narnia for me. So we have one more Narnia book on this list, and that book is The Magician's Nephew, the prequel book, book number 1 in the chronological order of the Chronicles of Narnia. And this was one when I was starting my Narnia read through, I didn't think I would like at all. The idea of a prequel doesn't always appeal to me. So my shock when I read this book and it ended up being one of my 2 5-star books in the Narnia series. I absolutely loved it. I thought it was just it hit all those beats that I like about the Narnia books: the magic, the adventure, meeting like whimsical characters and animals and creatures in the magical realms. And it's just so much fun. And something that I really enjoyed a lot was minor spoilers for this. I'm not going to give away too much, but minor spoilers. You get to see the creation of Narnia itself in this book. And there's a scene where Aslan is literally creating the world in front of our main character's eyes. And it is just so descriptive and literary and magical. And it's one of the scenes from the entire series that has really, really stuck with me throughout all of the 7 books. And even just now thinking about it, I was just in wonder when reading it. I thought it was so, so cool. This book is also really funny too. Like there's a lot of I can't think of a better word than this, just shenanigans that our characters get into. A lot of weird stuff happens. And there's a lot of comedy that involves like the Narnian characters when they're first being born and Narnia is coming to life, and you got these talking animals. They've never seen a human before, and there's some great character interactions where they're just trying to figure things out. And a couple moments that made me laugh out loud in this book that I really, really enjoyed. So that is The Magician's Nephew, a big surprise for me, but definitely one of my favorite of the Narnia books. Coming in at number 3 is going to be another Star Wars High Republic book that I read, and that is The Eye of Darkness. I believe this is the first, yeah, the first. I keep looking at my Star Wars books up on the shelf there. This is the first adult novel in phase 3 of Star Wars The High Republic, and I loved this book. I gave it a 5 out of 5 immediately when I was done. Didn't even have to think about it. I just thought it was so cool. And one of the reasons that I really enjoyed this book is throughout phase 1 of the High Republic, I was kind of back and forth on the Nihil or the Nile as villains. They don't get me wrong, they definitely do a lot of things that disrupt the Republic and make how strong they are known. But I was still just kind of I wasn't buying it. They seemed disorganized and just reckless, and I was like, are these guys really that big of a threat? And with the Fallen Star, and then following up onto this one, the Eye of Darkness, where I won't give away anything, but they set up a thing that's called the Occlusion Zone. And this is when I really started to buy into them as the villain. I was like, okay, they are really, really cementing their place in the Republic. They're causing a lot of headaches and heartaches for the people of the Republic. And this is when I really started to buy into them as the villainous force and for seeing them for what they truly are. And the main character, on this cover here is Martian Rowe, who is the leader of the Nile. And I think his character is just absolutely fascinating. And this book really elevated that for me. So um, there's a couple things about this book that I thought were iffy. For example, one of our main Jedi characters, he just spends the majority of this book moping, and I was kind of like, all right, dude, let's get into it. Let's go save the galaxy. But as far as what it did for the villains of the book, I thought just really elevated this to the top for me, and I'm very excited to read more Star Wars. So now we have our final two. I'll preface this by just saying a funny thing. And a couple weeks ago, I released a video, and it was my 10 favorite books of all time. And I had to think a lot about those books. Like it took me weeks and weeks to finally come up with 10 books that I was going to put into that video. And then I read the last 2 books on this list, and I'm not 100% sure yet, but I'm pretty sure that both of these books are going to make it onto my top 10. So right after I finished making my top 10 favorite books of all time, I read 2 books that I think are absolutely going to end up in my top 10. I usually have to take a couple weeks after reading a book or even a couple months to after I finish reading a book as to whether or not I know for sure like, how much time do I spend thinking about it over the course of the weeks that I finished it. But as things are going and looking so far, both of these books are probably new top 10s for me. So this book, number 2 for the month, is The Terror by Dan Simmons. This was a book that I thought was absolutely going to be number 1 on this list until I read this final book. But this book right here is the highest order of 5 out of 5 stars that I can possibly give a book. It was just absolutely amazing. And this is one of those books that kind of set me back a little bit for my reading for this month because it did take me almost 2 weeks to get through this book. It's quite a chunky book. It's like 750 plus pages, but it is absolutely worth it. And I'm so glad to have read it. For those of you that do not know much about this book, it is basically a these 2 ships that are off on an expedition to look for what is called the Northwest Passage, and they get trapped in the Arctic ice. Arctic ices. That was a tongue twister there. They get trapped in the ices, and they get stranded on their ships in the ice, and they can't get free. They're stuck there, and they're being also hunted by some sort of like supernatural element. And it basically just follows the day to day of all of these different sailors as they're stuck in trying to deal with this situation. And the thing I loved about it the most is it was scary on two fronts. You had the supernatural element, which I thought, was cool and disturbing and was definitely scary. But then you have the human element of this book, which I thought was even more terrifying. And the human element is all of these sailors, their descent into madness throughout the course of this book and the things that they have to deal with. They're facing the supernatural threat, which is already making them freak out. But then also, they're battling food shortages. Some of the food is starting to go bad. They're stuck in sub-zero temperatures for months and months and months, constantly battling frostbite. Um, there's mutinies that you have to worry about. Some men trying to instill panic in other men, and people trying to battle that. And it was just absolutely incredible and disturbing from all different angles, supernatural and realistic, which I really really loved. And when you're reading this book, there are a lot of chapters that go into incredibly painstaking detail about like the ship and the backstories of the characters. And the first half of the book, you might be like, I don't know if this is for me. Like, it seems a little bit like too over gratuitous when it comes to description. What I'll say is stick with it, because by the end of the book, I think all of that extra detail really pays off to complete the package and just makes it one of the best books that I've ever read of all time. I'm definitely going to reread this at some point, but I'm going to give it quite a while because it is an investment. And like when I finish this book, you ever get that sense of accomplishment where you're like, I really accomplished something by reading this book? That is how I felt at the end of this one. Is I felt like an overwhelming sense of accomplishment for having finished The Terror. So this is a great book, definitely a top tenner for me. I'm pretty sure. Check it out. All right, I talked about that one a lot more than I thought I was going to. So let's go into my favorite book of the month of August. And that book is going to be The Hero of Ages, the final book in the Mistborn Part One trilogy by Brandon Sanderson. And you'll know if you've watched some of my previous videos, I am a big, big fan of the first two Mistborn books. I love the first Mistborn book. I really enjoyed The Well of Ascension as well. Definitely a 5 out of 5 star book for me, but I didn't like it as much as the first one. It was a little slower, not many different changes of location, which held it back a little bit from surpassing the first book. Well, I'll say the third book did not have those problems for me. There is no shortage of action and change of location. And this book is just like boom, 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 the entire 650 some books of it. And I think this is one of the most satisfying conclusions to a trilogy that I've ever read in my entire life, up there with like Lord of the Rings and everything like that. So it just, it, I don't even know what to say about this book. Like, it made me so emotional, and I only finished it about 4 days ago, so I'm still very much processing the things that happened in this book, but it made me so emotional, and I was so in love with the ending, but sad that it was over. And I think the one thing that I'll point to that I really just love about this series as a whole is there's no point throughout these books where I felt like Brandon Sanderson was like making it up as he goes. Sometimes you get that inclination as you're reading like trilogies or series where you're like, like, does this actually tie back into the first few books? This trilogy felt like Brandon Sanderson painstakingly mapped out the entire journey from beginning to end. And there were so many callbacks from this book to the first two books that just had me thinking about all the events of the previous two books and how it all ties together in this epic culmination. And it just made me want to go back and read the trilogy over again, because I feel like knowing the ending, there is so much payoff to be had throughout the course of the trilogy that just makes me want to go back and reread it and discover all of those things over again. So that is The Hero of Ages. This was definitely my favorite book that I read this month, and probably a top 10 for me. Like, I think I had the first Mistborn book in my top 10. I think this is going to supplant that one. Going to give it a little bit more time before I solidify that, but I just have that feeling. All right, now let's get into the books that I want to read in September of 2025. I will keep this nice and quick because I've been talking for a long time. The first book is actually one I finished this morning before shooting this video. It was my nostalgia pick of the month, and I find that I start my months with the nostalgia picks, usually because they're books from my childhood, so they're a little easier to read. It's nice to start a month off with an easier book because it just kind of boosts your confidence. But that book is Del Toro Quest 2, also known as Del Toro Quest Shadowlands. So this is the second entry in the trilogy that is Del Toro Quest. There's a Del Toro Quest 1, 2, and 3. I've talked ad nauseum about Del Toro Quest 1 on this channel. It's one of my favorite books of all time. I absolutely love it. It's one of my favorite book series from my childhood. So I was very excited to get into Del Toro Quest 2 because I didn't remember this book very well. Like, I remembered the first Del Toro Quest very, very well. I know I read this when I was a kid, but I think I only read it once because there weren't many details that I remembered from it, and I loved it. I didn't like it as much as the first one. I gave it a 4 out of 5 instead of a 5 out of 5, but it was still so much fun. A great adventure book, much shorter than the first Del Toro Quest. You can see here it's not that big. The first Del Toro Quest is like 8 books in one. This one is just 3 books in one, 3 books in one, so significantly shorter, but still a great time. And I just finished that this morning. Next up, I'm going to read On Writing by Stephen King. So I'm currently reading Stephen King in like publishing order that he published the books, but I kind of have to deviate that from a little bit because I have to read this book for school. It's required of me, and I have to actually finish it by the end of next week. So I'm going to start this book immediately after this video is over. So a little deviation from my publication order of Stephen King, but I have to read it for school. So I'm going to take care of that, and I'm very excited to read this one. Next up, we have the book that I said I was going to read in August, but I just didn't have time for, and that is Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas, the fifth book in the ACOTAR series. The reason I couldn't finish it is because this book is huge. It's a little intimidating. That's why I just kept pushing it off and off and off throughout August. But I'm finishing it this month. I'm going to finish this series. I am looking forward to it, but it's a little intimidating because it's a big book. The next book I want to read is this one right here. It's called The Disaster Artist, and this is a not a memoir. That's the wrong word for it, but it's a nonfiction book about the making of one of the worst movies of all time. It is called The Room. It is a movie that I have watched a ton, and I absolutely love it. It's one of those like cult classic movies that has a really devoted following, even though the movie is really really bad. And one of the actors of that movie wrote this book about the making of The Room and just how disastrous it was. This was also adapted into a movie that starred James Franco and why can I not? It's James and Dave Franco. It was the brothers, yeah. And they made a movie based off of this book. The reason I'm reading this one now is I'm actually going to a screening of The Room later this month, and the author of this book, Greg Sestero, is going to be there. So I just want to have it fresh in my mind. Hopefully, I can get him to sign it. That would be really really awesome. But that is The Disaster Artist. And then finally, well, not finally, actually, next up, we have the next 2 books in the Star Wars High Republic. I am slowly chipping away at this. 2 books at a time is my goal. So we have Beware the Nameless, which is one of the middle grade novels in the High Republic. And then we have Temptation of the Force, which is the next adult novel in the High Republic. So very excited for those. Don't have much to say about them because I don't really know what they're about. They're just a continuation of the story so far. And now finally is a book I don't have, but it is the book club pick that I am part of. I'm part of a book club with my fiance and her friends, and it was my fiance's month to pick a book, and she picked the book. I'll put a picture on the screen here. It is called Dry Hard by Nick Spalding. This is one of her favorite authors. Apparently, he's like a comedy writer. I know absolutely nothing about this book or this author at all, besides it's supposed to be a comedy. So I'm interested to get into that, see what that's about, and check it out. So that is going to be the books that I read for, or hopefully read for the month of September. Thank you so much for being here in this video. No, it was a long one, but I just had a lot to say about a lot of these books. I like them so much. So thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time in the next video. Take it easy.